Hi, I'm Josh Connolly, and this is Jackass.
Oh, it worked. Oh.
Sleepy Hollow is one of my favorite films, definitely my favorite Burton film, and in that film, heads get removed. A lot. It's stylized, a touch campy, and entirely awesome. And on the show, we have done our fair share of head destruction in one way or another as well. But one thing I always wanted to toy around with is showing a head actually landing and rolling around on the ground. But with zero budget, of course, that's kind of difficult. Normally, how you would do this, including how they did it in Sleepy Hollow, is that you would get a face cast of your actor, like we did with Josh for UFO Yeah.
The process began with making plaster casts of each victim. Once the duplicate heads were cast, the details were added.
All the heads are silicone painted. The hairs have been punched in individually. Eyeballs are put in. And we'll take teeth casts of the actors and then make acrylic teeth and fit them in.
But we don't got that kind of money, so we need to do this digitally, and that is what we're gonna do today. But first is how we cut Josh's head off. We opted to go in a very simple route here with two shots, one with Josh on green screen playing it all out, then the second with Justin and no Josh that we could time to the first shot where Justin does the head slicing motion. Of course, with this, Justin has a real machete in his hand and he is swinging it in the direction of the camera, which means even though that it is highly unlikely that it'll come out of his hands, there still is a possibility that it could come out of his hands. So for this action, we made sure everyone was completely clear of that area before Justin did the move. And like I said last week and a million other times before that, nothing is more important than the safety of your people on set. So no matter what you do, always think of what is even the most unlikely event and act like it is 100% possible. Put every person's safety on set as the #1 priority no matter what. But once we have these two shots, we can move right into post, which for this episode, we are once again working with our good friend Joey. His work is excellent, so definitely check out more of his stuff in the notes below. But starting off in After Effects, we're gonna make a new comp with our footage, overlaying the green screen shot of Josh over the background layer, and we're gonna use key light to key our green screen. A good trick to get a cleaner key is to desaturate the chosen color value, which helps clean things up without losing any detail or softness in the edges. Another trick with keying is to apply CC composite, which will basically undo the dispilling from key light. Then apply advanced spill suppressor. This can yield better results in a lot of cases. We'll also blur the alpha channel and add a light wrap effect to make the edges blend better. Instead of masking the neckline by hand, we can key out the shirt on a separate layer, invert the alpha, expand the edge, and use that as a matte on the main Josh layer. To fade this matte in and out, we'll use a CC composite effect with RGB only unchecked. We'll use a similar method to isolate the head, and we'll animate it to fly out of frame just by keyframing the position. It helps to animate the anchor point to stay in the center of the head so the rotations can be animated more easily. Next, we'll add in a few blood spray elements and animate them to fall out of frame as needed. We'll want some elements spraying directly upward and a few following the motion of the machete. Instead of tracking the blood elements to Josh's neck, we're gonna animate some CC smear effects to make the blood look like it's trailing from the base of the head over time. To make the effect more interesting, we'll bring in some smoke-like energy elements from our Triune Digital Energy Pack and tint paint them red. Now for the blood, we turn to Action VFX. They actually have something perfect and specific for this. Some great assets that have blood shooting up from a stump and falling onto a correct surface, which if we were doing this on a large budget for a feature, this is exactly what we would shoot ourselves to get custom assets just like this. So you're getting as close to realism as possible going this direction. Practically shot assets are always a huge help. So we comp that in and track it into the shot. Finally, we're gonna add some more gore to Josh's shirt. The shirt has a lot of motion blur, so we're just gonna do a simple point track, parent a 3D plane to that, and animate the orientation of the plane to match the perspective of Josh's back. We'll parent a few blood splat elements to the plane and some morphing to fix the tracking on the shirt, and we have our final shot. Next up, we make heads roll, but before we do, I do want to thank today's sponsor, which is Came TV. We've been using Came TV gear across tons of projects like There Comes a Knocking and General Film Right episodes for years. What I love about them is it's solid gear that's much more affordable, so for lower budget projects, it's a massive help. And of course, we've shown quite a few of their lights on the show before, but they have a wide range of things like wireless headsets, live video capture, tons of great lights, camera support and tripods, dollies, monitors, stabilizers, batteries, camera rigs, and a bunch more. Recently, they've put out their new product showcase with some great new additions like their wireless headset, great for communicating with your Steadicam operator, or the Came Nano. This is a much smaller footprint communication device. You can even plug your earbuds right into it. It's a great solution for communication on a budget. Then they have the Andromeda Mark II. I was a big fan of the first one, which we did a review for, so I'm really excited to get my hands on this one. You've got these RGB tubes with great mounting points and magnets on the back, which I love. There's so many places that you can slap these things right to when they have that magnetic backing. And again, they're RGB, which you know I'm a huge fan of. I hate having to use gels, so if I can help it, I am always reaching for an RGB light. And of course, tube lights are some of my favorites too. They also have the Cobb Mark II, another upgrade to another light that I'm a fan of, nice and powerful, and a new power station with dual mounts with slots for USB, D-tap, and DC 12 volt, all in the front and all really useful to have as well. So if you're looking for any lights, rigging, camera support, or a ton of other useful bits of gear, jump into the notes below. I'll put a link to their site and one to their 2021 product showcase. Every year they put out better and better stuff, so definitely take a look.
And his name is John C.
Dude, I'm so sorry. Dude, you annihilated that thing.
To pull this off, we need a practical element to apply a digital version of Josh to. So I went online and hunted down this $100 prop head. It was close enough to Josh where I figured it just might work. So when it was time, we just had to toss it and toss it and toss it again and again and again and again and again. About 100 takes, and then we finally landed on something we were happy with. Which meant, again, it was time to send it off to Joey. Now in Blender, Joey imported our footage into the motion tracking workspace. Our footage is 4K, so he created a proxy version at half the resolution to speed things up. We're gonna track as many points in the background as we can. Some of them will need to be tracked by hand, especially when the footage gets too blurry for the trackers to latch onto any detail. Once that's done, we're gonna solve the camera motion as a tripod pan, and we'll let Blender automatically calculate the focal length and lens distortion. Now we're gonna add a camera solver constraint to our camera object and move the camera object around so that the grid is lined up with the scene. Once the ground plane is matched closely enough, we can add in some planes to act as the floor and wall. These will help with the lighting of the CG face, but will also be very useful as reference when tracking the head object. We'll create a new tracking object in the motion tracking panel, and we'll add 2 trackers on the face, stopping them once the head gets too blurry to track. We'll link the tracks to some empty objects which sort of act like nulls in After Effects. The trackers will have no depth information, so we'll add in a plane, parent it to the camera, and set it as a depth object in the track constraints. We'll also orient one track to the other using a track to constraint to give it rotation data. Next, we'll add in a basic 3D model of a head, which will serve as our main main head track, we'll position it to where it makes sense in relation to the ground and parent it to the tracked object. The trackers are only really useful at the end of the shot, so we'll work backward, going frame by frame, animating the head model to line up as closely as possible. When doing this, it's a good idea to avoid animating the scale of the model, since in reality, the head isn't shrinking or growing as it moves. Now it's time to set up our lighting. Our scene is entirely in shadow, so we're going to be getting most of our lighting from the world background. We'll set up a simple gradient in our world shader to approximate the color of the sky, and we'll add a sun lamp with a wide angle to act as a bright area of the sky. For the CG face, there are a few different approaches that you could use, and at first we were doing some 3D scans of Josh's face, and it was going well, but then we ran into some big issues that held us up too much, and with the clock ticking to get the episode done, we decided to use Avatar SDK. This site can generate a 3D head from a simple photo. It's not perfect, gives you sort of a video game kind of look, but it's enough to make it work here. So now we'll set up the material so that the face texture affects certain parts of the shader, like the specularity or the subsurface scattering, and we'll also give the eyes their own material to give them more of a glossy look. And once we have the head model imported and linked to the head track, we'll just adjust the shader so that only the front of the face is visible. To do that, we'll use a spherical gradient as the mix factor between the head material and a holdout shader. To make it easier to position the gradient, we'll create a new empty object and parent it to the head. In the shader editor, we're going to make a texture coordinate node and set the object input to empty. Now we can control the position and scale of the gradient with the empty object. The nice thing about this effect is that we only need to render Josh's face. No shadow pass is needed since the shadow from the real head is already in the footage, which is what I say all the time. As much as we can do practically to help the digital, it's gonna do a lot to the believability every single time. But now we can shift over to After Effects and we're gonna import our render, make sure it lines up with our footage. We'll color correct the real head to match the skin tone of the CG render. And to finalize the shot, we're gonna track the background and make a trail of blood using blood splat elements. And once those are in place, we have our final shot. Now again, a proper scan of Josh would have given us much better results, so that is something we're going to dive back into another time. But here you have a low budget way to pull off a stylized beheading. But that's it for today. Big thank you again to Joey for all his help on this episode. Links to his work below. And if you aren't subscribed, punch that subscribe button as if it told you it didn't like Dune, and hit the bell button to be notified when we put up new content. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.
He just needed to be respected. That's all he needed. He needed a couple flags of respect. Yeah.